The cabin lights were still warming up when the tension started. Passengers were settling in, overhead bins were clicking shut, and everyone seemed in a rush to get this flight off the ground. But the moment a tired black mom stepped into the aisle with her young son, everything shifted. She moved toward her assigned seat, just wanting to sit down and catch her breath. But the white passenger already sitting there refused to move. He crossed his arms, claiming the seat was his, speaking loudly enough for nearby passengers to turn and stare. The mom stayed calm, her voice steady, even as embarrassment washed over her. Her son squeezed her hand, sensing something was wrong. A flight attendant hurried over, trying to defuse the growing scene, but the passenger kept insisting he wasn't going anywhere. People whispered, phones quietly lifted, and the whole row grew tight with awkward silence. The mom didn't argue or raise her voice. Instead, she reached into her bag with a quiet confidence that made even the attendant pause. It wasn't anger in her eyes, just a calm certainty, like she knew something no one else did. When she finally pulled out a small black case and opened it, everything changed. The flight attendant froze. A nearby passenger gasped, and the pilot, who had just stepped out to check what the delay was, stopped in his tracks the moment he saw what she was holding. But before anyone could say a word, the cabin fell silent, and the real story began. The pilot's eyes stayed locked on the small black case in her hand, but she didn't say anything yet. She simply held it there, steady, as if she was waiting for everyone else to catch up. The white passenger who refused her seat leaned back a little, suddenly unsure of himself. Though he still tried to look confident, the other passengers watched quietly, sensing something important was unfolding but not knowing what it meant. The mom gently guided her son toward the aisle so he wouldn't feel trapped. She looked exhausted, like she had already been through a long day before stepping onto this plane. Her clothes were simple, practical, and her hair looked slightly windblown, as if she had rushed from one place to another without a moment to breathe. But there was something in her expression, something calm and alert, that hinted she was more than just a tired traveler. The flight attendant glanced at the pilot, silently asking what she should do next. The pilot stepped closer, lowering his voice as he asked the mom if they could speak privately for a moment. She nodded, her tone still gentle, reassuring her son that she would be right next to him. Even then, she didn't raise her voice or confront the man in the seat. She just stood there with a quiet confidence that made people wonder who she really was. As the pilot leaned in to look more closely at the case in her hand, his face shifted just slightly, but enough for the nearby passengers to notice. Whatever he saw wasn't ordinary, and whatever she was about to say would change everything. But she hadn't said it yet. The pilot asked the mom to step just a few inches into the galley, far enough from the seats that their voices wouldn't carry. Passengers leaned in anyway, trying to catch even a hint of what was being said. The white passenger sat stiffly in the seat. He had refused to give up, his jaw tight, though he kept glancing toward the galley as if he suddenly wanted to undo the whole thing. The boy stood quietly near his mother, watching the adults with wide, worried eyes. The pilot examined the contents of the case more carefully now. His expression wasn't fearful, more like cautious respect. He asked her a few questions in a low voice, and she answered just as calmly, giving short, precise replies. She didn't boast, didn't act superior. It felt more like she was someone who preferred to stay unnoticed, but circumstances forced her into the spotlight. The flight attendant listened to her, face softening as she realized the situation was far more complicated than an argument over a seat. Meanwhile, a man sitting across the aisle whispered to his wife, wondering aloud if the mom was part of some protective detail. Another passenger nervously texted someone, not even sure what to say. Rumors began spreading through the back rows, each version of the story getting bolder than the last, yet none of them came close to the truth. The boy tugged gently at his mother's sleeve, and she smiled at him, but even that smile carried tension, like she wanted to keep him safe without drawing attention. The pilot straightened up, clearly torn between airline protocol and whatever responsibility he now felt toward her, and just when it seemed like he was about to make a decision, a voice crackled over the radio behind him, sharp, urgent, and completely unexpected. The urgent voice on the radio made the pilot freeze mid. Even from several rows away, passengers could sense the shift in the air. The calm, everyday routine of boarding vanished, replaced by a quiet tension that spread through the cabin like a slow ripple. The mom didn't flinch. She simply closed the black case in her hand, holding it against her side as if she had been expecting this moment, or something close to it. The flight attendant swallowed hard, her eyes darting between the pilot and the mom. She asked if everything was all right, trying to keep her voice steady, but she didn't get an answer. The pilot stepped back toward the interphone, listening closely as the voice continued, low and firm, giving instructions he clearly wasn't prepared to hear. His expression tightened with every word. The white passenger in the disputed seat shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that the small argument he started had spiraled into something far bigger. He tried to avoid eye contact with anyone, but people were already staring at him, wondering how one refusal could lead to this level of caution from the crew. The mom rested a gentle hand on her son's shoulder, guiding him a little closer so he wouldn't feel lost in the growing tension. Her calmness didn't match the atmosphere around her. If anything, it deepened the mystery. She seemed focused, alert, like she was listening for something no one else could hear. The pilot turned back to her, his voice barely above a whisper. He asked one more question, short, careful, and full of weight. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a slow breath, glanced toward the passengers watching her, and then looked the pilot straight in the eye before she could speak. The radio crackled again, this time with a message that made the pilot's face drain of color and forced the entire cabin into silence. The second message on the radio was shorter, sharper, and delivered in a tone that left no room for misunderstanding. The pilot instinctively straightened, his hand tightening around the phone. A couple of nearby passengers exchanged nervous looks, sensing that whatever was happening had just taken a serious turn. The mom still didn't react with fear, just a steady focus, as if she had been bracing for this exact moment. The pilot stepped closer to her again, lowering his voice even further. He asked if she was traveling alone or if anyone else was supposed to meet her at the destination. She hesitated for the first time, glancing down the aisle, scanning the passengers quickly. Her eyes paused on someone in the middle, rose someone who instantly looked away, almost too quickly. The moment lasted only a second, but the pilot caught it. His expression tightened. The flight attendant noticed too. She leaned toward the pilot and whispered something, her voice trembling just slightly. He nodded, and the tension around them thickened. It was no longer just about a seat dispute or a black mom being disrespected by a stubborn passenger. Something bigger was unfolding, something involving security, identity, and whatever was inside that black case. Behind them, the white passenger sat rigidly, pretending not to listen, but his eyes kept darting nervously between the mom and the crew. Passengers pulled their bags closer, unsure why the energy in the cabin felt suddenly dangerous. The mom shifted her weight, positioning her son behind her just a little. She didn't raise her voice or explain anything yet. She simply kept her gaze locked on the person who had looked away. And then, as the plane door thudded shut, a new voice, this one from somewhere inside the cabin, spoke up quietly but firmly. And everything stopped. A calm but steady voice rose from the middle, rose cutting through the tense silence. Everyone turned at once. A man in a simple gray jacket stood up slowly, raising his hands just enough to show he meant no harm. His eyes met the mom's, and for the first time, a hint of recognition passed between them, something unspoken, something shared. The pilot stepped forward, shielding the mom's son instinctively, but the man shook his head gently. He explained, in a low voice, that he had been assigned to the same flight for a reason. He wasn't part of the crew, and he wasn't an ordinary traveler. He revealed a small badge different from hers, but real enough that the pilot stiffened. He said he had been told to keep an eye out for a specific threat, someone traveling under a false identity, and apparently, the signal he received minutes earlier pointed to someone already inside the cabin. Passengers froze, afraid to even breathe. The mom finally opened her case again, revealing her own credentials more clearly. The tension around her snapped into place, the keywords whispered earlier, the cautious respect, the radio messages. She confirmed she was traveling with her son because the assignment changed unexpectedly. The man nodded, apologizing for the confusion but insisting they needed to act fast. The white passenger who had refused her seat shrank back, whispering that he didn't know anything, hadn't done anything. No one was accusing him, but the guilt on his face,